nuestro siguiente speaker. Él es Adam Scott. Él es fundador y director creativo de Free State, diseñador urbano, estratega y profesor. Ha escrito sobre la experiencia diseñada para cambiar la manera en la que pensamos, sentimos y actuamos. Además, ha estado en proyectos como Rethink Design, Architecture for the Post-Pandemic World y The Experience Book han sido sus libros. Adam va a tener una charla que se llama Bienvenidos a la Revolución de la Experiencia y es auspiciada por JIC Ingeniería Panduit. Bienvenido, Adam. Welcome. Un aplauso, por favor.
Thank you. Hello. Right, your heads must be so full. This has been a very dense and rewarding few hours. So I'm the last speaker. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and connect things across the board, connects it really horizontally. So my name is Adam Scott. I'm a strategist, a futurist, an evangelist for the cause. So I'm going to speak very enthusiastically, but hopefully not too fast, about this particular subject, about the experience. But really, I'm just going to repeat exactly what everybody else has said. I'm going to talk about culture, I'm going to talk about people, and I'm going to talk about an ancient wisdom. So you could leave now, because there's nothing more to learn from this. Okay, so let's begin with something. So I spent 10 years writing this book, which was extraordinarily painful. And every time I came across a wonderful story, I would put it in these shelves. And the shelves would get bigger and bigger and fuller. And there'd be stories from history, stories from a shaman in her cave. There would be stories from medieval cathedrals. There would be stories of what brands were doing on the streets of London and New York. And slowly I began to see these commonalities of experience. And what I loved about it is we saw that fundamentally all of these great experiences always began with people, exactly what Carolina is saying. But what I mean by that is keenly understanding who we are designing for, how they think, feel, and act. That is the beginning. And I think we could probably all agree with that. But then what was interesting is the programmatic bit, the storytelling bit, the idea that we need to be taken on a journey, the beginning, middle, and end. But actually, we need a moment of collision to get our attention. If you think of the Wizard of Oz, it is that moment when we are transported from a world of black and white to a world of color. So that's critical to this, the storytelling element. And lastly, these stories will be more memorable if we wrap people in the place, if it is immersive, as if every single channel is working together. And these are the kind of experiences that we will remember and we will pass on. So if we think about that cave that Reagan was talking about, what's interesting about that is that story was told from generation to generation to generation. It is the power of the experience, I think, that does that. So I have been banging on about this subject for many, many years, and this book is part of that. But I've also been practicing it. And what I'm interested in, and I thought it would be reassuring to show you some workplaces, is using the same principles as how we think about that experience as the foundation by which we design everything. So whether you're thinking about a children's party, or whether you're thinking about the Suncorp Tower. So this is 34 stories tall. It's a whole precinct in Brisbane, and Leesman just voted it the most successful building in the region. And I think one of the reasons it works so well is it thinks about itself as a constant campus. It thinks about itself always in conversation. It cares deeply about the people that are there. Like the AMP Tower, this is another one of the buildings we worked on. This is 54 stories high. It is in Sydney. And in many ways, that's a terrible place to work, you might argue, stuck up there in your unit. So what we're trying to do is create these stories, these programs, these curators that will constantly bring people together and try and connect us. These are very old-fashioned things. I'm also going to talk a bit about our work with Nike. But essentially, I'm going to say the same thing again and again, that for the last 35,000 years, our 4,000 distinct languages and 7,000 cultures have thrived at scale because of the way we design the experience. Now, one of our problems as humans is we get massively distracted. We get distracted by very bright screens. We get distracted by AI. We get distracted by technology. We get distracted by the new shiny thing. I'm talking to you about the old shiny thing, the thing that has never changed. That's all I'm going to talk to you about. Okay, so I design experiences across many, many different campus types. And the reason I'm interested in telling you this is whether you're designing for the employee, whether you're designing for the student, whether you're designing for the resident or the passenger, how will you better understand how we attract people, how we involve them, and how we create a sense of belonging? You know, that narrative is fundamental. And we need it more than ever. Because I think we need to be honest here, even though we're in the most wonderful building, in the most wonderful city, and I've got the biggest possible screen behind me. Actually, I think our cities are really struggling. I see the world over empty cities, empty offices, empty shops, empty streets. I see people like, Daniel showed us that baby, and the idea that the mother infinitely scrolling, getting that dopamine hit. We need to fight back. And I would say the design of experiences is an important part of that. And I'm not saying it's one against the other, but I am saying that we need to be more intentional about how we design, and we need to get out of our boxes. We need to not be designing just these spaces within these red lines. I want us to be thinking about the city through this way of working. I want these horizontal connections of a universal foundation, that we are all designing this experience, and we begin thinking about people and program and place in that order. I don't care if you're an interior designer or an architect or a technologist. One of the problems with that is if you ask an architect a problem, they will tell you the answer is a building. If you ask an interior designer, they'll talk to you about the space. If you ask a technologist, they'll give you an app. If you ask a spoon designer, they'll give you a bigger spoon, right? I want us to be starting in the same place. Okay, so I'm going to quickly give you some thoughts on that same place, that beginning where I think we should all start. And I'm going to talk to you about it in terms of strategy, in terms of a shared purpose, how we start from the very top and we work our way to the bottom, and we go from the bottom to the very top. I'm interested in how those stories, which we've heard about, bring us together. I'm going to talk to you about design, about the whole ecosystem coming together, not technology and platforms versus places and spaces versus people and culture versus brand and identity. The whole thing working in concert. And I'm going to talk to you about it in action, because this all means nothing if we don't bring it to life and we don't get better every day. But you know this. Right, I'm going to have to be fast. So let's go into it at speed. So I'm going to show you these diagrams. We're going to talk about strategy, top to bottom, experience design, left to right, and this slightly corrupted image here that looks like a very happy pig is going to be all about action and getting better with time. Okay, now let me introduce you to somebody who's going to help us with this. He is called W. Edwards Deming. W. Edwards Deming was a statistician, an engineer, a mathematician, a theorist. And in 1950s, Command and Control America, that other one, what he was talking about was he was saying that we need to start with a shared purpose. We need to make sure that everybody is aligned. He was saying that processes are not the key thing, that people are always going to be more important than the process. Don't fall in love with the process, he said. And lastly, let's respect the people who are at the coalface, the people on the shop floor. Let's listen to them above everybody. Now, he was not listened to in America, but he went on a lecture tour to Japan. And in Tokyo, one afternoon in the late 1950s, in the front row were some people from Datsun. Datsun that later became Toyota. And they listened to him very carefully because they love this idea of continual improvement. He spoke about it as a PDSA cycle. And let's just show you this. Oh, hang on a minute, different thing. Anyway, I will mime it to you. So he talked about the idea of planning, doing, studying, and acting. That's what he talked about, all these things together. And what Toyota spoke about it, they called it Kaizen, change for better. We now talk about it as agile. And in many ways, I'm going to talk to you about all of this through an experiential lens. And I'm going to tell you about it in terms of vision, and how that vision is always going to align the brand, the purpose with this enabling layer, and we're going to dig into activities ahead of environments. And I'm going to reference brands, because brands like Red Bull do this better than anybody else. I think the built environment and workplace is not a good example of this type. I'm going to mention what it means for design. And I'm going to show you an example from Melbourne Airport that above the line obsesses on all of these steps, just like Carolina was speaking about, as how we need to better understand how people think, feel, and act. And then all of the touch points can then be arrayed in service of that journey. And I'm also going to talk to you about how, particularly lastly, this continual improvement cycle is something that we can use to bring everything together. And I'm going to reference universities, because universities, I feel, are piloting and prototyping better than anybody in the world. Right, let's get into this. So I know this is a workplace conference, but I wanted to talk to you about an airport. I think an airport is quite a useful way to dig into this approach. We've worked with Melbourne Airport now for over 7 years, I think nearly 9 years actually. And what we've been doing with them, is helping them get over the fact that this is a place dominated by changing movement infrastructure. People are constantly digging holes, pouring concrete. What we needed to do is help the whole organization focus on the people experience, the traveler experience, and the staff experience. Let's ensure that everybody works better together. Now, this is an interesting place because 29 million people go through it every year. That's 100,000 every single week. And interestingly, if you ask those people, they will talk about the fact that 10% of them have assisted needs. They need extra needs. So we went through this process. The inputs were very much the same as what Carolina spoke of. There was survey research, so we're there digging into what we can learn from workshops and surveys and questionnaires. We have field research, so we have ethnographers watching everything carefully, documenting how people are feeling, how they are acting, how they are moving. We have location data, so 19 million mobile pings across every week. We're observing where people move, where they spend their time. And lastly, sentiment data, the kind of thing that marketing agencies use all the time. And then we bring all of this together in these great big, wonderfully complicated charts, which I know you can't read, but let me just explain it to you. Above the line is all the information about how people are thinking and feeling. We're getting into it with the efficient travelers, the elderly travelers, the assisted travelers. And then below the line, we're asking of the organization, right, places and spaces, what are you doing? Brand and identity, how are you playing your part? What we want to do is essentially take the whole system and conduct it together. And the reason we're doing that is if you take a particular moment in this journey from the garden gate through to, let's say, check-in here, you'll see how incredibly anxious people are at that point. You'll see that they need so much support. So what we're doing here is really leaning into that moment there and getting the whole organization to work together. Now, from there, we create detailed briefs that then will help all of the elements, whether it's the technology, whether it's the interiors, whether it's the wider architecture, to work together. Now, I'm just going to show you a quick film of that so you can see how that might come together as a brief across all those channels. Right. Can we turn it up?
Let's bring it all together in the last little teaser with an introduction to the design briefs, the critical connecting link between the bold ambition of the vision and the build-ready scoping of action. Let's take another future-facing walk together through some of those first design cues, full of powerful prompts and provocations for the creation of something extraordinary. From the very beginning, we noted the need for end-to-end care. Now, just imagine designing for seamless human and digital support at every step, so that passengers choose their own pace of flow, feeling unflustered, informed, supported, and in control. On arrival, we heard of the importance of a sense of place. So let's create a dramatic subtropical forecourt with places to sit, eat, and drink amongst the abundance of nature. How very exciting. Through check-in, we help passengers transition on their own terms. Let's design in the round for the efficiency of service, the lack of queues, the biometric interface, the biophilic environment, the proactive, expert, kind hosting is beautiful and beautifully managed. Things are really flowing now. And on to security and immigration. There was clearly way too much going on. So here is a major intervention. Pause points to gather our things, ourselves, and our thoughts. We take a breather, check the flight times, plan the next stage in the journey, and rehydrate in preparation for what comes next. And phew, everyone feels relaxed and calm. And on to the departure lounges. Now passengers step into a world of thoughtfully curated local and different offers. All around, a rich mix of opportunities to eat and drink, to shop, to work, to rest and to play, all supported by hosting and branding that has a cohesive, only in Queensland feel. It's a place to delight in. And finally, the gates. Passengers immerse themselves in the local First Nations culture through beautifully designed experiences. And as they step on the plane, they might reflect on the journey so far, from forecourt to gate, calm, comfortable and happy, all their needs catered for. We hope this has given you a taste of the depth and breadth of the whole ecosystem opportunity ahead of us. Now, design teams, throw yourself into the experience framework briefing materials as your constant guide, and let's design 360-degree experiences that truly connect the world and create the future. We can't wait to see what you come up with.
So you can see the ambition of that is everything working together in concert. And these are some of the results, some of the spaces that have come out of it over the last few years. But one of the things that I think is most moving about it is we trained 20,000 people to be part of this system. The people who are directly employed by the airport, but also all of the partners. And the culture, which is very much what Daniel was speaking about, has completely changed. The whole program is called Stepping Forward, and it's the idea that you will all step forward for the moments that matter for whoever you are representing. Now, you can see this one is about being very horizontal, about making connections across the board. I thought I'd show you one that's much more about that strategy. So this is Nike's World HQ. I don't know if you've ever seen the film Gattaca or The Island. It's like that. There's 18,000 beautiful people with perfect teeth running around in activewear. It's just an extraordinary thing. And round the outside is a berm where people run every day. It's like the perfect campus. There are 300 acres. There are 75 different buildings. This one is called the Serena Williams building, and is connected to a wearable on her wrist. And as her pulse races, the building comes alive. The LEDs change. It is an extraordinarily gymnastic campus. However, still, people don't necessarily want to not work from home. People like to be with their children and their dogs and their comfortable interiors. So Nike needs to work hard to bring people back. And rather than mandating, they want to pull people. So I'm particularly going to talk about this experience strategy and how one might better start with understanding that ideal experience. As Carolina said, it's all about people. So we are finding out from people what they want, what they're interested in, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. We're finding out which particular areas, which particular stories, which particular technologies, and what times. Why are you not going in on a Friday? Why is it all about a Thursday? How can we make Thursday at 4 o'clock work harder? Because at the moment you're all leaving, and at Thursday at 7 o'clock there's something wonderful happening. So we're trying to ask lots of time-based questions because we want to design with time. And from there, you remember the thing I was saying about the data intelligence, the big data, the mobile data. Here we're finding out where people spend their time, how they move from A to B, and then we're overlapping that with the sentiment data. So we're finding out why they're moving, what they're moving to. And it allows us to better think about the events and the activities and to begin to use those to better design the campus. Now, that then led us from, if you remember at the bottom, we were talking about environments and activities. We then started to rally around an identity that was all around collaboration and connectivity, of course, but also creativity, and ensuring that we could give the people on the ground, the athletes, the agency to make it their own. Now, I'm going to show you a little film of that. And stupidly, we didn't make any of this with AI, which I deeply regret now. So you'll see it's a bit clunky. Okay, cue film.
Nike World HQ Experience Master Plan. Let's spend 2 minutes speaking and sketching to the evolving vision and how we might all make it happen together. The Experience Master Plan leads with Nike's purpose to move the world forward through the power of sport, breaking barriers and building community to change the game for all athletes. The proposed identity for World HQ specifically is that it is the epicenter of purpose, culture, and heritage that fuels collaborative innovation. It is then underpinned by 3 values: hyper-community, the building of a community-led workplace, living lab, enabling the workplace's ability to collaborate and innovate, and global host, ensuring World HQ's position as the home of Nike. Then the enablers which bring the identity and values to life, the humanware from government structure to teams, the software, a central program-led OS supported by tech and services, and hardware, the fixed and non-fixed components of the Experience Master Plan. With the purpose, identity, values, and enablers in place, we ignite the 5 themes that frame the design concepts. These are the first practical steps on the journey towards activating and managing the Experience Master Plan. And as you go through the themes in more detail, you will see different scales of activity, from something immediate like an event, to a medium-term activation like adaptive reuse, to a long-term initiative that transforms the whole infrastructure. This is where we are today. The next job is to dig into these layers, notably understanding the enablers and prioritizing the concepts, so that we can quickly make this Experience Master Plan a living, breathing reality. What joy.
So you can see with these, we really love the fact that we're trying to go quite quickly from the strategy into design and activation. We are simultaneously talking about what people are going to do alongside those value statements of the purpose. And we're also loving drawing by hand. We find this really draws people in. We find actually that helps us then, the storyboarding, to then create these story worlds. And from there, we lean into what it might mean for the activities. We lean into how that will affect the environments. We then look at that in terms of the greater master plan that is all about leading with activities. And then, even though that's obviously about the place, we're also then working with Nike in terms of what that might mean for all of these different layers of influence. So yes, it's about built environment and location, but also nutrition, events, and sports. Again, the whole ecosystem coming together to pull me into campus. And ultimately, whether it's a very, very big project or a very small project, it has the same effect. We're using it as a prototype to inform the greater system. Right, I'm going to bring this together now because we're running a bit late. So what I wanted to just land with you really, as you can see of all of these things, is that out there, society, I feel, is ever more polarized and atomized. And I'm seeing our cities suffer. Our cities are our greatest invention for collaboration and connection and competition at great scale. But we need to lean into that. And I look at the public realm around here, and I look at the universities I went through yesterday, and I particularly went to the Salmona Civic Cultural Institute, and I think, yes, this is what I want more of. That is wonderful. But what we don't do nearly enough of is think about it as an integrated effort. We are all stuck in our silos. We are increasingly fragmented within our organizations. So what I want to see is ideally a foundation that could better bring us together, a common understanding that is not new, we've just forgotten. This is what we have been doing for 35,000 years. So if, like me, you believe that fundamentally the experience is the thing that breaks through, that cuts through, that is the thing that then draws us together, then I suppose what I want to conclude with is that I find this is a great way to connect with users. I also find in terms of my host conversations, the brands, I can better bridge gaps and I can better use this to improve. And fundamentally, I would say, this is not about what I'm doing. I think we are all experience makers, whatever our role. And if one believes that an organization is a sum total of its good relationships, then we need to inspire better relationships. And that's what this approach does. Right. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening.
Muchas gracias, Adam.
Thank you.
This is for the questions.
Okay.
Muchas gracias por esta charla también muy inspiradora. Vuelvo y les digo, vamos a empezar con las preguntas. Por favor, métanse a Slido para que podamos ver las 3 preguntas que Adam nos va a contestar ya en esta última charla que tenemos en WORKTECH 25. Ah, bueno, mira, they're in English. Las preguntas están acá. La primera, what project is your dream to work on creating?
I totally understood that one. I totally understood that. I'm really interested in, I suppose, the city experience, obviously. I'm really interested in new cities because I see them being designed by gigantic engineering practices that are interested in how efficient and effective it can be rather than how it might be expressive and inspire agency in individuals. So yes, new cities, but also I like doing very small things too.
Gracias. La siguiente pregunta. En el caso de LATAM, ¿cómo podemos hacer económicamente la propuesta? Porque es injustificable. Voy a terminar esa. Porque es injustificable ante el cliente. Did you get it? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree. I was speaking to a gentleman called Daniel earlier about this. And I think too often, right, I don't know if there's any project managers in the room, but there's that thing where everybody is rushing at speed. We need to get the architects and designers drawing as quickly as possible. And in many ways, strategy is often given away for free. I think we need to find a way that we can pause at the beginning, do the right research to create a vision that will bring us together. Because I need to tell the project managers, wherever you are, that that is where we can be more efficient, because we will be more judicious in the way we spend our money. Remembering that the project is not just getting us to day 1, the project is getting us to day 10,001. So I think this is not about justifying an unreasonable expense. This, I think, is a fundamental expense, but actually we can all do it. We just need to encourage our clients to pause a little to better reflect upon the brief at the beginning.
Muchas gracias. Y nuestra última pregunta. En tu presentación hay muchos ejemplos maravillosos, proyectos grandes, muy importantes. ¿Crees que su enfoque también funciona para proyectos pequeños?
Yes, yes. My son is here. He's 15 years old. And when we were little, when he was little, I wasn't so little, we say he wanted a party. He wanted a James Bond party, right? If I told him that we were going to rent the community center, he'd be quite, okay, right, and what are we going to do? And you go, right, well, we're going to play a game where Grandad is Scaramanga, and we're going to shoot him. Okay, that's good. And what are we going to eat? Well, we're going to eat these wonderful cakes. And what are we going to drink? Okay, that sounds great. And how are we going to invite people and ensure all my friends come? Let's think about that. And how are we going to ensure that they remember it afterwards? And is there going to be a goodie bag, right? We all are constantly designing experiences. Every Friday night, when we think about where we go out, we are designing experiences. So for me, I've shown you big things because I thought that would be, I've traveled a long way and I need to be impressive. But really, I'd love to show you some children's parties, and we could also say, that's exactly the same.
Muchas gracias, Adam. Un aplauso y muchas gracias por estar acá.